In this video, we are going to look at data fetching from API using promises and async-await. So promises and async-await, they are two best methods JavaScript recommends while fetching data from an API. Okay, so these two concepts, promises and async-await, they are two ways of handling asynchronous programming tasks or asynchronous tasks. So what are asynchronous tasks? Asynchronous task or asynchronous behavior is where tasks are executed independently, and one of those tasks can be data fetching. So data fetching from an API is a typical example of a synchronous task, and we can handle it using a promise or async-await. Okay, so promises were the first ones that were brought in ES6 to handle synchronous behavior or asynchronous behavior in JavaScript. So really the difference is on the syntax. So they first brought promises to solve the problem of callback here. Now if you don't know callback here, I'm just going maybe to explain it later in another video, but in this video I'm just going to explain promises and async-await. But really what it means, promises, they use a syntax whereby they can handle data fetching. So let's say we are going to fetch data from an API endpoint. So let me say we have an API endpoint here. Let me just say const API, and let's see just this link here. So we can have this link. By the way, if you go to this link, it just have a list of products here. You can see it is a really working API endpoint, and you can find this on this fakeapi.com, fakestoreapi.com/docs. You can just see this is why I got this endpoint. Okay, so this is an API. So what we want to see, and it returns back all this list of products. Okay, so what we want is to fetch this data, and we console it using both two methods. Okay, so I have this endpoint. So if I wanted to fetch data using a promise or promises, what I would do is, for instance, let me just say I have a function. Let's create a function called fetch data function here, and let me just say using promise. Okay, using promise. That name has nothing to do with what it is doing. This, you can just create this name on your own, or you can just use any other else. So this is fetching data using the promise, and in JavaScript we fetch data using the fetch function. So we just say fetch, and this fetch API takes in simply this endpoint. So we could just copy this endpoint, or we could just simply pass in API here. Okay, now with a promise, what it does is that a promise has three states. Okay, so a promise has three states. It has pending, it has fulfilled state, and then it has a rejected state. Okay, so for all these tasks, it has a function to handle these tasks. By the way, if I'm to explain a promise in simple terms, or using an example, a common example you would understand. Let's say you have been promised, you went for a lottery, or you went for betting. Okay, let's say you went for betting. So when you go for a betting, you place a bet. Okay, and at that point when you place a bet, so the betting company makes a promise. Okay, so the betting company makes a promise, And that when you place a betting and maybe you are placing a bet on a match, so while a match is going on, the promise is going to be in a pending state. Remember, the betting company places a promise that if you win, you will get the money. If you lose, they take your money. Okay, so that is a promise that was been made by the company. And then while the bet is going on, we are in the pending state. While when you win, that is the fulfilled state, and when you lose is the reject state, the rejected state of promise. So the promise has three states: the pending, the fulfilled. So fulfilled is when, not fulfilled, but fulfilled. When the fulfilled state is when the promise is successful, and this one is when the promise is rejected or the promise has failed. Okay, so the promise has two functions. It has the then function, then, to handle the successful task, and then it has another function called catch, and this one is to handle the error that caused the failure of the program. So in the promises we have these two methods, and they're the ones we want. So when we fetch data, the data can fail to come for some reason, or the data can come. So we just say if the data, for instance, from that API, we just chain this function, then function, okay? And in this one, we have the response. So it takes in a function, and then here we return response, and we convert this into JSON, okay? So that is the first thing, return. There's no need of writing this key, return. So here, in the first thing is we fetch the data. When everything is okay, we say get this response back from the API, and then convert it into a JSON object so that we can consume this data. When that one is done, we can also chain another then. When that one is successful, okay, then you can get data, and let's say console.log data, okay? So sometimes this is enough, but then if anything goes wrong, we can have the catch, okay? Now in the catch, this function, it actually takes in the error, and we can just see console.log something went wrong, console.log, and we can just say something went wrong, and then we can also pass in the error so that we can look at it. So this is the way how you would fetch data using a promise, okay? You do fetch data from the API using the fetch function, and then we chain these two methods. The then method, now the then method is saying if this was successful, then do this task. When this above task was successful, then continue and have our data. But if this fetch fails for some reason, then it will run this catch function. So if we go back to the console here, let's just wait, okay? We just wait for a second. By the way, we did not run the function, so they just run this function. Like so. And now let's go back. So this function is, and you can see we have our products here in the console, okay? We have our products here in the console, and this is really, really nice, okay? So this is how we do fetch data using a promise. So let's just see how we can fetch data using the async-await. So async-await was brought in ES8. Okay, async-await was brought in ES8. Now this was brought in ES8, and these promises were brought in ES. So these are the promise, they were in ES6. Okay, so these are more new, they are newer in JavaScript in ES8. So how do we fetch data in Async-Await? Normally they took a different approach. So you can see the first approach here, we just change the methods, the then method and the catch. Now there they used a different approach to handling the error handling here, how they capture the error, and also they simplified this version here. Now this version of fetching data is not really looking straightforward. Okay, it is not looking straightforward, so they improved the developer experience by making this process more neat and very clear. So in ES8, they just say create another function. I'm just going to say fetch data using async, using async. Okay, just like that, using async. Now the first thing you do when you're going to fetch data using the async, that this function here, we have to tell it that it is asynchronous by adding a keyword async before that function. So you add this keyword async before the function that is going to be using async-await. Okay, so here we would say let, okay, or could you say const, okay, response, okay, we could just say response is equal to await. So we wait for this, and what we say, we await for fetch, fetch, and then of course we pass in we just here we pass in the API. Okay, so you can see here we first see response, and we just get the response right away here, and then from there we also say const data is equal to response. Okay, remember we response.json, but this one you also await. So we use this keyword await to mean that we are waiting for that task to be done. Okay, so for instance here we say const response is await fetch, so it goes and carries this task here, fetch, and it will just go and fetch from this URL we have here on top. Okay, so const, we have the response here from the data from this fetch, and then we can get the data from await response.json. We convert this response into a JSON object, and then we save it into our data. And now if we say console.log data, okay, now this would work if we just wait. Of course, let's stop this function here and let's run this one. If I say fetch, and let's say using this async-await, so if I do this one and it runs, and you can see we have our data. But then how do we handle the error here? Okay, how do we handle the error? So what they did, you just wrap this this code in a try catch. Okay, so we say try So we have this try catch, which also is a function that can just a minute, just a try catch here. Oh shit, let me just write it, try. So you try this, or we can catch here the error. And this one can take in the error. Okay, so this is the try catch. So in the try is if it is successful, we put all this one. So we say try this. Okay, if there is any problem during this one, and then here we can just see also console.log something went wrong, something went wrong. Okay, we can just say something went wrong, and we can also just also put the error there. Okay, so this is how we handle the error in when you're using async. The first thing, you have to make this function asynchronous by adding this keyword async, and then when you are getting your data back or your responses, then you use this await. That's why we call it async-await, because it uses async keyword and await keyword, and then you append it on these tasks like so. And you can see this is very simple version of understanding more than this one. Okay, so you can just use any of these ones, they are all okay. The one you find to be more comfortable with is the one you simply do. Okay, so let's just go ahead and check. It takes in time, and then we have our data here. Okay, we take in our data here. So thank you so much for watching. This this has been JB explaining how these two functions actually work. Thank you so much. See you in the next video.